Welcome, everybody. Good morning, afternoon, evening, no matter where you are in the world. Welcome to Getting in the Flow while kayaking. We are really excited to have Darcy back with us today. This is her second of 3 so far webinars. My name is Melissa DeMarie, and I am your host for the show. I am the founder of California Water Sport Collective, or Cali Collective for short. Some of you regulars who've been here every week are probably going to get tired of my spiel, but you never know. There's some new folks that are showing up. I do love seeing so many familiar names and faces out in the audience today. I'm kind of having a Mr. Rogers moment where I want to get my little mirror out and start naming people I see today. But anyways, for those of you that aren't familiar with Darcy, she is the owner of Small World Adventures. She runs adventure trips in Ecuador, Idaho, and Arizona, and she is an expedition paddler. She's also an author. She wrote the book Amazon Woman, which chronicles her source-to-sea expedition of the entire length of the Amazon River, she being the only woman and vegan that's ever done that. So you guys will have to tune back in another few weeks where she talks about that book. But for now, I'm going to pass the mic over to Darcy. Maybe Darcy, if you want to just give a quick little background of your paddling for those of you that maybe aren't as familiar with you. But thanks so much, Darcy. Thanks so much for being here. I am just so excited that you're back on the show with us.
All right, thanks, Melissa, and thanks for throwing the vegan part in there with the Amazon. I appreciate that. Yeah, I'll definitely give a quick background. First, real quick, I just want to give a little description of this flow state that I'm talking about tonight, like talking about that feeling of getting in the zone. And so probably everyone here has experienced at some point, like doing an activity like a sport or music, reading, it could even be work, but you got so involved in what you were doing that you kind of forgot about everything else. You forgot about time, maybe you forgot to eat lunch, even your most persistent worries fell away, and you didn't really have to think anymore about what you were doing. You were just sort of doing it, and you probably really felt like you were kicking butt at whatever it was that you were doing. And so this is the feeling that I'm talking about. This is the in the zone or the flow state that I want to talk about tonight. And yeah, I like to start all my talks with disclaimers. So I have 2 for tonight. And the first one has to do with my background. Like all through middle school and high school, I did like organized team sports. After high school, I got pretty into climbing and mountaineering for a short time. And then I started kayaking, and that's kind of been my driving force for the last 20 years. And I've had a lot of I have a lot of experience of being in this flow state. And just recently, like maybe in the last 6 months, I got interested in like approaching it in a more academic sense, I guess, so I could understand what was going on a bit better and maybe be able to cultivate this experience more often. So I'm pretty new to the study of it, but I'm pretty excited about it. So that's what I want to share with you all tonight. And the second disclaimer is that I was recently emailing with a friend about this, and he pointed out to me that the whole study of flow and all the information we have on it has been based on interviews with people who have felt this experience. So there's not like hard data, there's not something measurable that we can look at. And so I just wanted to share his skepticism with you because, you know, you should approach everything with a critical eye, I guess, a critical mind. But for me, I think the thing that's most likely to make believers out of us is that probably everyone's had this feeling at some point. You know, maybe it's only been once in your life, or maybe you're lucky and it happens every week to you. But it's a really good feeling. It's a feeling where you feel your best and you perform your best. And so seeking out opportunities to get into the zone more often, I think is a worthwhile quest in itself, regardless of how much good data there is or isn't. So yeah, that was a little bit about me and a little bit of my disclaimers. So now we'll dive into this. So what is flow? And I kind of gave you a description before, but most people say it's like an optimal state of consciousness where we feel and perform our best, and it's being completely absorbed in what you're doing. So a lot of my talk is based on the research of a guy named Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, and I was very happy to finally find someone with a last name that's harder to spell and pronounce than my own. But for anybody that wants like a bit more info on this, or if you don't feel like writing stuff down now, I've made up a bunch of slides that I'll play at the end of the talk that include the spelling of this guy's name. They also include like all the main points I'm going to cover, and then some references for further reading if you want. But so anyway, don't worry about writing stuff down right now. You can just listen, I guess. So anyway, this guy, Csikszentmihalyi, he is an American-Hungarian psychologist, and he's the one who coined the term flow state. He calls it total involvement with life. And so much of my talk tonight is based on his book, which is called Flow, The Psychology of Optimal Experience. And he actually set out to study happiness when he discovered this concept of flow. And what led him to this path was he was in Europe, and he was 7 years old when World War II broke out. And so kind of his formative years were happening during rebuilding after the war and in the aftermath of World War II. And he was really struck by the differences. Like, he noticed that many people were never able to be happy again after the war. But more notably, he noticed that some people were able to be happy. And even though they had lost everything in the war, their homes, their jobs, oftentimes their family members, they still were able to find happiness and find meaning in life. So he set out on this lifelong quest to figure out sort of the roots of happiness, or what makes a life worth living. And he talks a lot about sort of the typical trappings that we're all familiar with, like, if I just had a nicer house, I would be happy, or if I just could get this promotion, I would be happy. But it's becoming more well known and more well documented that this is not how happiness works. And it's just not tied to material things, or even to sort of specific achievements that we think are going to make us happy. And Csikszentmihalyi showed that even as people's wealth and material gains grew, that their happiness didn't grow with it. And it is pretty well documented that people who lack money for basic needs like food, shelter, and physical safety, they do report a lower level of happiness. But once you get to that level where your basic needs are covered, any increase in wealth does not equate to an increase in happiness. And so Csikszentmihalyi, this is a quote, he believes that a man can make himself happy or miserable regardless of what is actually happening outside, just by changing the contents of consciousness. So, of course, changing the contents of your consciousness is about as easy as it sounds, which is definitely not easy at all. But Csikszentmihalyi believes that cultivating flow experiences more often is one way to start changing the contents of your consciousness. So let's go back to talking about what flow actually is. And there's 8 things that people commonly report when they're in a flow experience. And this can be, people get into this flow state in any variety of ways. So this is not just from kayaking or sports. People start playing music, listening to music. There's all kinds of ways to get into them, but they all report the same thing. And so number 1 is being completely involved in what you're doing. So a really high level of concentration. Number 2 is a sense of ecstasy, or being outside of everyday reality. And number 3 is great inner clarity. So knowing exactly what needs to be done. Number 4, knowing that whatever you're doing is doable, or that your skills are up for the task. Number 5 is a sense of serenity. So you're no longer worrying what anybody else thinks, or worrying about your mortgage or anything like that. Number 6 is a sense of ease. You know, whatever you're doing feels easy, even though it might be something very difficult, it's coming to you easily. Number 7 is a distorted sense of time. And this can go either way. Time could speed up or slow down. So maybe you've run a waterfall and your free fall only took 3 seconds, but to you it felt like 5 minutes, and it felt like you knew exactly what to do the whole way you were falling. You could see every drop of water, you could spot your landing. Or the reverse could be true, like maybe you spent a 10-hour day at work and it felt like it went by in an hour. And then the last thing, number 8, is intrinsic motivation. So these people were doing whatever they were doing simply for the sake of that task. You know, they're doing it to win a prize or to make money or anything else. They were just simply doing the activity for the activity's sake. So what does all of this have to do with kayaking or water sports? I think we're pretty lucky that we are engaged in this sport that actually has a lot of opportunities to get into the flow state. And by kind of knowing the ingredients and knowing some detractors from flow, we can hopefully start to cultivate these experiences on a more regular basis. So let's go over some important ingredients of flow, or things that you need in order to get into the state, and how these can relate to kayaking. So the number one thing is you've got to set goals. And if you don't have goals, you're going to be unlikely to challenge yourself. And, you know, I'm sure everybody's different, but for me, I normally like to have one big goal. And let's say, like when I was starting out kayaking, I really wanted to kayak the Grand Canyon, but I definitely wasn't good enough. So this was like my far away goal. And then everything else that I did on a day-to-day basis were kind of smaller goals that were working towards this end goal. So I would try to, you know, on my local run, it wasn't anything like the Grand Canyon and it wasn't really well suited to prepare me for it, but I decided I would try to surf 5 waves, you know, every time I went out, or do 50 rolls or something that in my mind would prepare me for the Grand Canyon. And so setting these little goals gave me something to do each day when I went out to my river. And these kind of things can help, you know, nudge you into this flow state. You have something to work towards. Number 2, you need to have access to experiences that are in line with your goals. Or if that's not possible, you need to realign your goals to things that you have access to. And this kind of goes back to the first point, but say like this summer, this was your big summer to step up to class 4 whitewater, but now we have coronavirus lockdown and you don't have any class 4 rivers in your immediate area. So you can't go kayak class 4. So you can't keep focusing on this goal, or it's just gonna bum you out and you might get sad and kind of lose all motivation, and that definitely won't help you get into flow. But if you do have access to a class 3 run, say, you can reorient your goals. And just like my Grand Canyon training example, you know, you can find ways to do class 4 moves on your class 3 run. It's kind of that idea of make the easy stuff hard so the hard stuff will be easy. And even though you can't run out and paddle your class 4 run, you can catch 20 micro eddies on your class 3 run that you've never caught before. Or if you have a paddler that's better than you, ask them to catch some really tricky eddies or do some weird moves and try to follow them, so you can sort of cultivate these class 4 experiences, even though you might not actually have access to class 4. Number 3 ingredient of flow is immediate feedback. And this is hard in some sports, but again, this is one way we're lucky in kayaking, is we always are going to have immediate feedback. So if we screw up, we're going to know it because we're going to be upside down or hitting our head on rocks or going backwards down a drop. It's just pretty obvious to us when we have made a mistake in the river. And also it's pretty obvious when we're doing well. So if you're trying to boof over a gigantic hole and you're not getting sucked back in and you're paddling away, that's immediate feedback that you've done it well. So yeah, we're pretty lucky in that regard for the water sports aspect. If you're doing a different sport or a different activity that doesn't provide sort of this natural immediate feedback, you're going to have to find ways to do that. And maybe that's by bringing a watch to see how fast you're running, or videoing yourself, or have some friend giving you feedback. But again, if we're focusing on kayaking, we've got that one pretty dialed in. Number 4 is to improve your concentration. And this one I think is really challenging, especially in our society, like with the cell phones and like messages constantly binging in and 1,000 things competing for our attention. I think we're actually training ourselves to be more accustomed to interruptions and have a shorter attention span. So this is kind of counteracts moments when we really want to focus. And I know for myself, I always have to remind myself, if I'm out kayaking for the purpose of trying to get into flow, my mind is always drifting to thinking of other things, and I really have to bring myself back, like concentrate on every stroke. You know, how is your shoulder feeling? How are your legs feeling? And just constant reminders to bring yourself back to the activity. A lot of people like to meditate also as a way to improve concentration, and I think this can be really helpful as well. Number 5 is doing the activity for the right reason. So this is this intrinsic value. And just some examples of this, like, you know, if you are going kayaking just to impress your new boyfriend or your new girlfriend, and you're so worried about how you're performing or how you're looking in this other person's eyes, you're not going to get into flow state because you're not going to be concentrating on yourself. Same thing like in a competition. Competitions can be great ways to cultivate this flow state. But if you are obsessed with winning at all costs and that's all you can think about, you're probably not going to get into flow. If you look at the competition as an opportunity to, you know, bring out the best in yourself by having this pressure of a competition, you're much more likely to find this good mental state. And okay, number 6 in the important ingredient for flow is getting the challenge to skill ratio right. And I'm gonna put up a little screen share here. All right, so this is Csikszentmihalyi's model, and the horizontal level or the horizontal bar is your perceived skill level. The vertical one is challenge level. And so you can look around this graph and see the various problem areas. So if you have a very low skill level and you take on a really hard challenge, you're going to be in that anxiety quadrant, and you're going to feel more fear, and you can't get into the flow state when you're truly feeling fear. Conversely, if you have a really high skill level and you choose a really low challenge for yourself, you're going to be bored and apathetic and also not getting into flow. So it's finding this balance between your skill level and pushing them just enough. You know, you need to get out of your comfort zone a little bit, but not too much. And this is a challenging thing for kayakers, I think. You know, it's hard as you're starting to step it up to, again, if you're trying to go from class 3 to class 4, what class 4 river do you pick as your first one? That's not going to be too big of a step up. You know, it's always going to be a new river. You know, it's harder, so your anxiety level is up there anyway. And this can definitely create problems for kayakers. And this is where going back to that idea of finding challenging moves on a river you know well as kind of a training grounds for when you're ready to make that leap up. But yeah, I think of all the things, the attention span and this, getting this ratio right is the biggest challenge for kayakers. And a couple quick things here before we go away from this graph. It's really important to note, like, I think adrenaline adventure sports have been pegged as having flow junkies or being a good way to get into flow, but danger is not a prerequisite for flow. And in fact, you know, looking at this graph, it's actually a bad thing, because if you actually feel like you're in danger, you're going to be up in the anxiety arousal area and you're not going to be in flow. So danger, definitely not a prerequisite. And class 5 kayaking is also not a prerequisite. So Csikszentmihalyi talks a bit about, like, when you're first beginning a sport or an activity, you might not feel flow that often because it's going to be so different to you. Your brain's going to be so overloaded that it's going to be hard to settle into a place where you can find flow. But as soon as you get, you know, a couple building blocks under your belt, you know, say back to the kayaking example, if you're moving from moving water to class 2, and maybe working on eddy turns, you know, it might be super scary for the first couple days and you can't relax, you can't get out of that anxiety quadrant. But after you start to feel good about the eddy turns, then you can maybe move into S turns where, you know, it's a similar idea, but you're pushing your skills a little bit. And when you're getting into this zone, I think you can find a lot of opportunities for flow, even as you're learning a new activity. It's just, again, getting that skill to challenge ratio correct. So, all right, let me leave this. Okay. All right, so those are the 6 important ingredients for flow. There's, I think, 4 important enemies of flow that I'll go over here. Number 1 is what psychologists call psychic entropy, or disorder in the consciousness. So this is something we're all familiar with. It's noise in our mind that disrupts our concentration. This is when we're stressed out about something. We really want something that we're not getting, any kind of tension in the brain. And Csikszentmihalyi says the normal state of mind is chaos, and entropy is the normal state of consciousness, a condition that is neither useful nor enjoyable. So this is his nod to acknowledging that this is one of the hardest things to overcome, to get into the flow state. And one of his suggestions for doing this is people or scientists feel that humans can process about 110 bits of information per second. And for all of you listening to me right now, it's taking about 60 bits per second. So you guys have 50 bits left over to scroll through your Instagram or yell at your kids, whatever else you need to be doing while you're listening to me. And the ideal moment for getting into flow is when you're so concentrated, or the challenge is high enough that it's requiring the majority of your concentration bits on this activity. So if you're using 105 bits of your concentration on paddling down this river, you're not going to have much left over to realize that you're hungry, or that you're worried about how you look, or any of these other things. So again, this is getting that challenge right so that you occupy most of your brain power doing the activity that you're supposed to be doing. All right, the number 2 enemy of flow is disengagement. And this is just sort of being withdrawn, not really caring about what's going on. And the example that Csikszentmihalyi uses is, say you walk to work via the same route every single day. It's really easy to start to look at that activity kind of in drudgery. You're going to work, which you're probably not that excited about. It's the same old walk over and over again. And it would just be easy to fall into this trap of blahness over what you have to do. But if you're a good flow person and you want your mind engaged, every day when you walk to work, you're going to find some little mini challenge for yourself. And maybe that's, I'm going to walk faster to work today than I did yesterday, or I'm going to notice 5 new buildings that I've never noticed before. And it's just these little tiny things to get your mind engaged. And number 3 enemy of flow is the inability to pay attention. And this can be from internal factors, that's that psychic entropy or the disorder again, or external factors. So if I'm out kayaking and I want to get into flow, I'm not gonna strap a little speaker to my boat and blare music at myself. I'm not gonna go with 20 friends that wanna talk the whole way we paddle down the river. I'm gonna go with the intention of concentrating on what I'm doing. And the number 4 enemy of flow is, I wrote in my notes, social media, but my real point is not doing an activity for the activity's sake, not getting the intrinsic value part right. And I think this is becoming more and more challenging because we are quite often motivated by, like, I got to do something to put something cool on my Instagram post. And, you know, as an author and a business owner, I am definitely guilty of this too, because there feels like there's a lot of pressure to constantly keep putting cool things up there. So, you know, I'll often try to pressure Dawn into running some big rapid just so I can get a photo or something silly like this. And these things are not going to help with your flow state. So yeah, it's just important that you're doing the activity for the right reason. All right, I'm getting close to going over time, so I'm just going to wrap this up. An important message, I think, from Csikszentmihalyi is that virtually any activity can be turned into a flow activity, and the wise seeker can find flow in any information or any situation. And he talks a lot about how this is how people survive concentration camps. prolonged jail time or other isolation like coronavirus times. You just have to cultivate chances for enjoyment. They're not always going to happen naturally or automatically, but if you look hard, you can find opportunities for this in almost any situation. And to tie this all back in with happiness and goals and kayaking, I talk about this a fair amount at the end of my book, Amazon Woman. But I thought for a long time in my kayaking career, like I wrote a big list of rivers that I wanted to kayak. And I thought when I had kayaked them all, I would just feel this overwhelming sense of satisfaction and happiness with my kayaking career. And I'd be free then to move on to the next stage in life. And I had no idea what the next thing was, but I just knew that or felt I should be moving on. But then I accomplished all my goals and this feeling never came. And even when I did like my biggest, hardest river that I was certain would give me this feeling, it didn't happen. And then after thinking about it for a long time, I discovered that, the experiences were what I needed. Having those goals, having something to work for, keeping improving my skills and kind of progressing in some fashion was what made me feel good. And so, yeah, I hope this made some sense to everybody, and hopefully you can put it into practice. I think for me, it's been a really cool experiment just being mindful of trying to get into this flow state. It really has helped me concentrate more. And, for 20 years, I just sometimes would get in the flow state and sometimes wouldn't. And I didn't really think much about what was going on when I did or didn't. And it's been, a really fun challenge to think about it and try to cultivate it more. So you guys can think of some questions. I'm going to put these slides up like I promised I would. And so if you guys want to screenshot them right now, you can, or Melissa's going to put this on YouTube eventually so you can go back and look at it. I'm not going to leave them up long enough for everyone to write this stuff down, but I just wanted to go through all this stuff, the important ingredients of flow. The enemies of flow. And these are just, I kind of in the talk combined this with the important ingredients of flow, but these are ideas to help you enter flow more easily. And if you guys want to read more about this, here's 3 books that I really enjoyed. So I was doing research about this. There's how you spell Csikszentmihalyi's name too, by the way. Here's 2 TED Talks that were really great, I thought. And then other sources. This Sports Psychology of Flow is a website that just has some interesting articles on it. And the animated book summary is a book summary of Csikszentmihalyi's book on flow. And it's only 5 minutes long. It's pretty fun to watch, and it gives a good summary of all of it. So yeah, with that, I'll pass it over to Melissa, and hopefully someone has some questions or wants to share their own experiences with being in the flow.
Thank you so much, Darcy. That was outstanding. And, I'm continually impressed with the caliber of knowledge and experience that has been going into these webinars. And now you are 2 for 2 on just outstanding. So thank you very much for that. We score. We're going to go into our question and answer session. We're going to run this same way we've been doing it for all the other webinars. The easiest way is go ahead and put your question into the chat. You can do a short version of it. You don't have to, type out a paragraph, but go ahead, put your question into the chat, and then I'll go through and call on people to chat with Darcy, and we'll just keep rolling that way. So we're going to start with Margot right now. Margot, I'm going to find you. And so just to kind of keep this rolling, I'm going to unmute you, and then once you're finished, go ahead and mute yourself back so I don't have to find you again, and then we'll move on to the next person. So, all right, Margot, you're up.
Hi, Darcy. Thank you
Hey,
for
Margot. Thanks for listening.
I was really excited and I read your book and I never want to paddle the Amazon. But my question is more about the sort of natural up and down. I feel like I could be in flow for a rapid and then I fall out again. Or if I'm terrified on a new run, sometimes I could do the whole run. But I'm wondering on your trip, I think it was like 180 days or more. You can't be in flow that whole time unless you're like a Buddhist monk. So do you have any sort of comments on falling in and out and like what you do with that other space to kind of try and get back? Because there's going to be, to me, like there's a natural, you can't, at least I have not been able to be in flow all the time. So
Yeah, this is definitely an interesting question, and I'll give my personal answer in a second. The end of Csikszentmihalyi's book, he talks about basically like flow state for life, and his sort of prescription for this is people that have sort of this overriding life goal or this guiding purpose in life. And then all their day-to-day or week-to-week goals are sort of stepping stones to get to aid this larger purpose, that they can sort of have a life full of flow, and definitely not like 100% of the time in it, but you know, have the most chances for flow in their life. So I don't feel that I have that. And to like specifically answer the question about the Amazon, I was really bad at the mental game at that point, like not so much for hard kayaking. Like I have a good mental game for hard kayaking. And it's interesting to me that sort of the harder it is and the less options I have, the more easily I can get into flow. So if I'm on a really scary river that's roadside, I'll just spend the entire time thinking, should I get out? Am I feeling it? I don't know. And it's just like this constant debate. But if I drop into a canyon and there's no chance for escape, it happens really fast. And it's like, I just know what I have to do. And then the noise shuts off in my head. The Amazon, yeah, had pretty good flow in the whitewater. And I would even say like our team had a pretty good flow because we were all working together really well. And that part was good. The flat water was not so good. And there was just like, for me, a lot of external problems. You know, like when we were in the red zone, I was so stressed out the whole time that someone was going to come kill us or something like that. So it wasn't much flow then. After the red zone, I was like so pissed off at Midge for paddling so slowly that there wasn't much flow then. And so, yeah, it definitely came and went on the Amazon. And I would say like maybe half the time I was in it or maybe less. You know, it's kind of hard to say, but I do think that in the course of a day, you could come in and out of it quite frequently. And, you know, a lot of people talk about, just like you said, you know, like a really hard rapid will get you in flow, but then maybe if there's like a bunch of flat water or easy stuff afterwards, you might fall out of flow. And yeah, I guess just being like sort of open, not like, don't get to a point where you're like, oh shit, I'm out of the zone, you know, just accept that that's going to happen and be ready to come back into it. And yeah, it's interesting to me, like I'm pretty sensitive to other people or noise, like that kind of stuff brings me out of it pretty well. So kayaking alone is the best for me, or just me and Don if he agrees not to talk to me. No, I'm just kidding about that. But I found it really interesting. I was watching the Dawn Wall recently with Tommy Caldwell, and when they're trying to do this crazy hard pitch that neither of them had successfully climbed before, the whole time when they're making hard moves, the guy belaying is like, you got this, Tommy, you got this, you got this. And I was just thinking, man, having someone yell at me like that, like would just mess with my mind. But for those guys, it didn't, you know, it was like they heard this, I'm sure they were super concentrated, but they just heard this little background encouragement and it worked. So I definitely think it's, even though there's these sort of principles that everyone feels or reports when they're in it, I think the way to get there and the way to stay there is going to be really different for each person. So figuring out what helps you and what hurts you can be good, and trying to seek out the former and avoid the latter would be good. Did that answer the question? Okay.
Awesome. Great question, Margot. All right. Cindy, you're up.
Oh. Hi, Darcy.
Hey, Cindy, nice background photo.
Oh, thanks. So this might be kind of silly or hard to answer, but what percent of time you spend in the flow state when you boat, would you say?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd say overall it's probably a low-ish percentage, like maybe 30% of the time. And yeah, again, I need some pretty specific conditions where, the river's quite hard. I don't have an easy mental out. I don't have a big group. So these are definitely some of the things that hold me back. But one thing I've been really happy to find lately is, like we are in Colorado right now and recovering from shoulder surgery. So we're not kayaking super hard stuff, but I've been having a really good time kayaking on easy stuff, but just doing like super weird moves. And that gets me in the flow pretty well. I'm not challenged per se on the river, but I'm finding challenging moments on the river, and just that little bit of it can pull me in pretty well. And so I think now that I've discovered this, I'll probably be able to increase that percentage, because I definitely was that person that had the attitude before of like, oh, my local class 3 run is so boring. I've done this so many times, and just like shifting my attitude recently has helped that so much and made it so much more fun, so much more challenging, and definitely cultivated more flow experiences.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
That's good. It gives us lots of stuff to work on.
Yeah, exactly.
Great. Thank you so much. Emma Johnson. Okay, you ready?
Awesome. Hey, Darcy.
Hey, Emma.
Hi. Love to see you again. It's been great to read your book and hear about your adventures in Colorado. But my question is about how the feeling of flow has changed for you over 20 years. Is it the same feeling as you had when you were 25 that you have now, or has it changed, like, I guess, in your gut and your experiences in your mind?
Oh, this is a hard question, but thanks for listening in. And this is, yeah, a good question. I think like the answer that comes to mind immediately is the feeling is the same, I would say, but the way I approach it or the way I get into it is a lot different, has changed a lot. And I certainly might have mistaken like a huge adrenaline rush for a flow state when I was younger or just getting into it. Like I survived some really hard river for me at the time, and at the takeout was just like, that was the best feeling ever. And so that probably was mistaken flow state and more just like a type 2 fun or adrenaline rush or whatever. And but yeah, I'd say like when I'm actually in the zone and everything is clicking, that feeling is quite similar, but I think I just recognize it a lot more now. So does that kind of make sense? And I guess like one other thing is, when I was younger, I definitely thought that I needed the adrenaline, the scary part of kayaking, the major challenge to get into it, where now it's like I can do it pretty well going on a trail run, which I love. And I was just experimenting the other day. I helped my parents clean out this horrible, disgusting shed that had like 15 years of pack rat nests and poop in it. And I was like, I am just going to get so into this. And we did it for like a day and a half. And it really was like, wow, I think I actually succeeded in this horrible activity, but I just approached it with a different mindset. So it went by really fast. It was like, I wouldn't go so far as to say it was enjoyable, but I was like, I am in this and I am not quitting till it's done. But just out of curiosity, since you asked that question, do you feel like you've had different experiences from younger you to now?
Hold on, let me get her unmuted again.
Oh, sorry.
There you go, Emma.
Yeah, that's a good question. I actually do feel like when I was first starting kayaking, I had more joy because it was unknown, and now I have more skill, but I have more anxiety. So it's like when I get there now, I feel more appreciative of it,
Mm-hmm.
versus it almost was more accidental when I was younger. I don't know if that resonates for you, but
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I didn't even know a name to put to it when I was younger, you know, it just felt good. And so, yeah, being more thoughtful about it definitely like puts a whole new spin on the experience.
That makes sense. All right. Thank you so much for that. Jennifer, you're up.
Hi guys, Darcy, you know,
Jenny.
you have been such an incredible guide for so many years, and I was wondering, how often do you experience the flow state while you're guiding a group in Ecuador or anywhere else?
Yeah, pretty often actually. And yeah, that's one of the fun parts about guiding to me. And what really makes it click guiding is when, you know, like when the group is being pushed, but not so much that they're like swimming all the time and in over their heads, but when they're being pushed, when they're paddling really well and rising to the challenge, and I feel like I have some part in helping them do that. And so, yeah, that's, I think that's one thing that's really kept the enjoyment of guiding up for 20 years of doing it. It's like, you know, people ask like, oh, you're doing the same thing all the time. And it's like, well, you know, every single day on the river is totally different, even though it's on the same river and you have a new group of people to try to, yeah, get this cohesion with. And of course it doesn't always work out, but yeah, it sure is an awesome feeling when it does.
Right. Cool.
Is that Steve walking around in the background?
Yeah, Steve is hard to be seen, but there he is.
Hi, Steve.
Got the whole cheering squad over here.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you so much. All right, Laura, LZ, you are up.
Hey, hello. I've loved every minute of this, and thank you so much. It's such a great like reminder, but also formula to how to, resume this state or seek it again for folks who have lost it. And my question is around, hold on, let me see how I exactly phrased. Well, when you mentioned towards the end of your talk about goals and how you were reflecting on the list of rivers that you had made for yourself and how you reached them and achieved those goals that you set when you were younger, but your feeling didn't change. How does that experience and that cycle change how your next goals are formed and how you approach goal setting with that mind for flow state now?
So I guess it hasn't changed my formula for goal setting much. You know, I still enjoy seeking out rivers that I think will be challenging for me, you know, whether it's challenging whitewater or challenging logistics or something like that. But what has definitely changed is what I expect to get out of it. So before, where, you know, I had all these river goals and I really expected that when I finished them, you know, that I would, number one, feel better about myself, that other people would look at me and be like, oh, she's a badass kayaker. And I always had these daydreams of people just like randomly walking up to me and being like, have you ever kayaked Gore Canyon on the Colorado River? And I'd be like, why? Thank you for asking. Yes, I have. And so I really, you know, used to think that I would get my worth or my satisfaction of my own life out of these river goals. And so I'm still making very similar river goals, but I no longer expect to get that kind of feeling out of it. Like the way I actually like execute the goals now, it's like I just try to enjoy much more the process of it, the training and the planning, and then like the actual completion of the goal. And instead of always thinking towards how am I going to feel when this is over, I try to think much more of, you better enjoy every minute of this process. And your screen is frozen for me, so I don't know if you heard any of that, but let me know, and maybe in the chat bar if you did. Oh, thumbs up, I got you back now. Okay. Did that make sense? Okay, cool.
Yep. No, Darcy, you're all good. We heard you the whole time.
Okay, cool.
This has definitely been one of the challenges of doing these webinars, is that we are real people and real kayakers and real teachers trying to do production, and so we do not have production studios or Red Bull media budgets, so every once in a while we cut off, and that's just how it is. But no, that was
literally perfect. Sitting in a shed right now, because when I did my internet test, this is where the signal was strongest.
No, it's perfect. I wouldn't change. Yeah, exactly. Authenticity. Perfect. Okay, Hannah Musgrove and Emma, you guys are next.
I was wondering that when you've recognized that you're in the flow state, do you stay in it?
So well, thanks for coming back, you guys. First of all, I appreciate that. So when I'm in the flow state and I recognize it, how do I stay in it? Is that the question?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, lately, since I started thinking more about this and I actually start to realize I'm in the flow state, for me, like the triggers or what it feels like, it's like, man, I feel really good in my kayak right now. And I'm thinking stuff like, okay, left boof stroke. Oh yeah, doing good. Keep going. I like have this kind of monologue in my head. And for me, keeping that going helps, and just kind of concentrating on like, okay, what's the next move? All right, dip my left edge to get around this rock. All right, right sweep stroke. Yeah, Darcy, you're kicking ass. And these kind of things. Sorry, I'm allowed to say the A word.
Yeah,
you're fine.
Just like keeping this sort of talking to myself as I'm going down the river going, and that just keeps my mind focused, keep thinking about kayaking rather than thinking like, oh, what am I going to eat when I get done? It's like, no, just keep thinking about the next move. And that seems to really help me stay in the zone.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your question.
Yeah, I think Hannah was really in the flow state the other day. Sorry, Hannah, I have to tell this story. Hannah and her sister both stepped up to a big rapid that they hadn't run before, and quite a big hit in Hannah's deck imploded, and she got her paddle blown out of her hand. And instead of swimming like most of us would have done, she just attempted hand rolls in really boily, aerated water until she was able to T-rescue off of my boat and rolled up with a boat full of water, and we paddled her to the eddy in her boat. So if that's not flow state, I don't know what is.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you guys asked a question my last talk, like, how do you practice suffering? Well, that sounds like some darn good practice for suffering, and way to hang in there. That is awesome. Yeah, showing your toughness. That's amazing.
It was pretty impressive. We all kind of laughed afterwards, like I may not have tried that many hand rolls. Anyways, let's does anyone else have any questions before we let Darcy do her closing statement? Last call on questions. All right. Darcy, back to you. So if you have any sort of closing remarks.
Yeah, thanks everyone for coming and listening. This talk was pretty fun for me because, like I was saying, studying this is kind of new. So signing up for this talk with Melissa really forced me to like gather my thoughts, read up a bit more on it. And yeah, I think, it sounds like everyone here has experienced this feeling. And for me, just being more thoughtful, more mindful about it, and going out on activities with like the purpose of trying to get in the flow state has really upped the percentage of times I can get into it. Because before, when it was sort of random and haphazard and I wasn't thinking about it, it would just be like, oh cool, I'm in the zone. But now, like, really trying to push myself there, like it actually works to try to get yourself into the zone. So hopefully you guys all have opportunities to go out and practice and thanks for listening.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Darcy.
Yeah,
that was
thank you all.
amazing. Thank you all for being here and for, attending and participating in this series. This has been really, I think, really beneficial for all of us as it has been for the attendees, because I know personally, and I know all the other coaches really feel this, we all really, really miss teaching and guiding and, not just being on the water, but, doing the thing that we enjoy doing the most, which is, what is one of the things that has kept us in this industry for so long. And so being able to do these things has really allowed us to still be connected with, everybody, our own students, our own people, and then our new people. I've met a lot of really great folks just through me getting a chance to do Q&As and talk with everyone. So, thank you all for being here and for supporting us and supporting this project, because we're having a really good time with it. Please tune back in. Darcy will be back on June 14th. Sorry to look at my calendar. Darcy will be back on June 14th, where she's going to talk about her book, Amazon Woman. If you have not read it yet, go out, get it, order it online, and come prepared with lots of questions. We'll schedule in a little bit more time for that one. Come back. We are just jam-packed pretty much until the middle of June, and then once this sort of shelter-in-place thing where we know what's going on, we'll reevaluate after the middle of June how often we're going to keep doing these webinars. We are going to keep it going. It's not going to end. We're all having the list of topics that have been submitted by our paddlers and coachers is just immense, and I want to make sure that everyone gets to talk about all the stuff they want to talk about. But don't miss out. Later this week we have Sage Donnelly. She's going to be coming on to talk about slalom technique that's going to help in your river running. So whether you're a slalom paddler or not, this is going to be a really, really great technique based talk. We got Anna Levesque on Sunday talking about how to face and transform fear. And then we move into our special edition family series, beginning with Emily Jackson, who's going to talk about balance, work, family, and paddling, how to get out there. Marianne Setter and Natalie Anderson are going to talk about pregnancy and, doing it while you're pregnant, how to get back into it, and what to do when you have kids. And the list keeps going and going and going. So get back on the website, sign up for everything. And if you have friends that have missed these webinars, we are offering all of the archives on our eStore as well. So come back, support us, and we'll be there to see you soon. Soon we'll be on the water and be able to go kayaking together. Yay. All right, thanks again, Darcy. And if everyone just wants to hang out for a second, I'm going to put up a screen share that has all of Darcy's information. You will be getting an email with the link to this recorded webinar. And like I said, Wi-Fi is tricky, and sometimes it takes a couple of days to get this onto YouTube, but it will come. So in the meantime, here's all of Darcy's information. Thank you again. We'll see you all later.
Everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.